This is a steam juicer my neighbor loaned me and I love it. I'm going to have to get my own. She's had this since the 60s, 70s and uses it all the time. Basically, you have your water in here and you boil that water and it steams in this, and this part steams and collects the juice. This part is a colander. I'll take off the lid and show you. The top one is a colander that holds your fruit. Right now I have plums in there and I just mashed them recently. But basically as the fruit breaks down and turns to juice, it goes in this part, which then collects on the hose that I've got attached to a pitcher there. And there's your juice. So here's the process, a little bit messy, but actually not too bad. Honestly, I think this is less messy than a regular juicer.
All right, so this is the basic process of how to use this juicer. I love this thing so much. I'm so grateful my neighbor let me try hers because I am sold. I will be ordering my own. It was so awesome. All you do is you cut your fruit in half. You can leave the seeds in and put it in the juicer there in the top. You have water in the bottom that boils, and it basically cooks through steam the fruit, which goes into the pitcher, into the juicer. So now that we have the juice, that's our first step in making fruit juice or syrup. You got to start with the juice. So now that we have our plum juice, at this point we can decide, okay, do we want to make plum juice or do we want to make plum syrup? I think for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pull out a couple of jars of plum juice, and then the rest I will go ahead and just turn into syrup. So you have the options. I mean, you could make it all juice, you could make it all syrup, whichever. My neighbor uses the plum juice. She turns it into popsicles, and it's really good for you and stuff. So it doesn't hurt to have some plum juice. So I'm gonna go ahead and just save a couple jars of plum juice. But honestly, the syrup is something we'd probably use more. So I'm gonna take out 2 quarts of the plum juice, and this is ready to process. So I just wipe the lids of your jars, put the seal and the lid, the ring on, the lid and the ring, and I'm just going to set it aside while I make the syrup, and then I'll process all the jars in a water bath canner together at the same time. So it's really easy. Again, with your fruits, your jams, your syrups, they're super easy to make. They're a great place to start because you don't have to worry about botulism, things like that, because they usually have that lower acidity level. So now I've got the juice pulled out. You want to make sure you measure. I love my pan. It has the measurements on the inside of the pan here. So it's a great way to know exactly how much juice I've got. And when you're cooking, and if you're cooking down to a certain point, it helps you keep track of exactly how much you're using. So for the syrup, we're going to add lemon juice. Now, I just kind of dip it like this for each teaspoon. The lemon juice, it basically is just going to help it keep the color. So it's not, you'll find some recipes that lemon juice is optional, and that's basically what it does. Is a lot of fruits will go darker in color, and the lemon juice helps the color stay. So I did add some lemon juice there, and then now we're going to add our sugar. So for a syrup, you want anywhere from half to 1-to-1 ratio. So let's say here we had 10 cups of plum juice, which there was actually more than that. But if you had 10 cups of plum juice, you could use between 5 and 10 cups of sugar. It just depends on your own, how sweet you like it, how sweet the plums are, things like that. For this particular batch, I did a half ratio. Because I was going to cook it down a little bit. So that's another thing too, is if you do half or 1-to-1, you still want to cook it down. You don't just add your sugar till it's boiling and it's good. It won't necessarily set up thick unless you cook it down a little bit. And for mine, I cooked it down. I had it boiling and cooked it down about 25%. So I think it was at 8 quarts, and I cooked it down to 6 quarts after, 8 quarts once the sugar and everything was in it, and I cooked it down to 6 quarts, and then it set up beautifully. It's really just a personal preference at this. It just depends on how much you've got, all that. So here we go. Here's it's finished. You can see it's thicker there. It's got the foam. Some people skim the foam off. I actually like the foam. I think it makes it look kind of pretty in the jars, and it tastes good. The foam tastes good. It's not like it's a gross foam. So I leave the foam on just because that's a personal preference. So when you're doing your jars, now we're ready to start putting our syrup in the jars. We get our little train going here. This is our assembly line. I have my daughters, my little helpers here. They were rinsing out jars. Our jars were clean. We just wanted to make sure there was no dust or debris in them. So we rinsed them out and we get a good setup. So I fill the jars, and then one daughter, she gets a wet paper towel and wipes off the rim to make sure there's no syrup on the rim, and then my other daughter puts the lid and the ring on the jar and sets it aside. And this is a great little, it's a great thing to do with helpers that way, because everybody's got a job and it makes it go so much faster. You can do this by yourself. For me, when I've done it by myself, I'll fill maybe five or so jars at a time, and then I'll wipe the rims and put the ring and the lid on. But it makes it a lot of help to have the helpers. So you can see we just kind of get our system here. So I'll speed up the video so you don't have to watch us take forever to fill every single jar, but that's the process. Fill the jar, wipe the rim to make sure there's no syrup, because if there's syrup on the rim, the sugars in the syrup will prevent the lid from sealing. So that's why you wipe the rim. So here we go. Super fast. Boy, sometimes I wish it was this fast to work. Basically, once we have our jars done and the lids and rings on them, we're just going to process them in a water bath canner. And for my altitude, I do 20 minutes in our water bath canner. And that's 20 minutes starts once the water is at a full rolling boil. So you have your cans in the canner, or your jars in the canner, and once it's a full rolling boil, that's when the timer starts. So I place a couple jars in, add some water, and then fill up the rest of the jars. Now you can do more than the 7 jars, like I had some little jars, as long as the jars are upright, and as long as the water, when you fill the water bath canner, as long as the water still goes about an inch above the highest jar. So you want the water about an inch above the highest jar, the highest lid, and then you're fine. And make sure all the jars are upright, and then you're fine. Process it for 20 minutes, and there we have our beautiful plum jam. Sorry, I mean plum syrup.